When you buy food from a supermarket, the cooking instructions will often tell you to preheat the oven before cooking it. And that's always made sense to me, but I know there are some people who never bother preheating. They just turn on the oven, chuck the food in, and to be fair, I've never heard of anyone getting food poisoning that way. So I've always wondered, when they write those cooking instructions, do they factor that in? But if that is the case, then people who do follow the instructions correctly must be massively overcooking their food. It can't work both ways. So to find out, I conducted an experiment. When you cook something, you're really doing it for two reasons, right? First of all, there's the food safety aspect. You're trying to cook it until all the harmful bacteria in that food are dead, so that it's definitely safe. But then also you're cooking it to try and make it taste nice and get it to the point that you like to eat it. And that side is very subjective. So for now, I'm gonna put that to one side and I'm going to focus on the food safety aspect, which is much more objective and scientific. The classic method for checking if chicken is cooked is to slice into the thickest part of it, make sure that it's steaming hot, make sure that there's no pink meat left, and that the juices run clear. And that's recommended by the Food Standards Agency, and it does work. But if you want to get a little bit fancier, you can get yourself a cooking thermometer, insert that into the thickest part of the meat, and check that it's at a temperature that we can consider cooked. And if you look up what temperature you should be looking for there, the answer you will generally find is 74 degrees Celsius or 165 degrees Fahrenheit. So I bought 2 Tesco chicken breast fillets, and I cooked one of them following exactly the instructions on the packaging, and I cooked the other one following the same instructions, but I ignored all of the advice about preheating. And in both of those fillets, I inserted a wireless temperature probe, which lets me monitor the internal temperature of the chicken throughout the entire cook. And this one actually has sensors all along the length of the probe, so you don't have to be too careful about getting it right in the center. As long as you insert it as far as you can into the thickest part of the meat, it will work out what the core temperature is. So first of all, let's look at the chicken where I preheated the oven and I followed the instructions exactly. So firstly, I fried the chicken on a preheated frying pan on a high heat for 5 minutes, turning it halfway through. This step doesn't really matter for what we're looking at, it's just to get the outside of the chicken nice and crispy. And then I put it into a preheated oven at 170 degrees Celsius for 25 minutes. And here are the results. Now bear in mind, this is only for my specific oven. You could do this and get a different result. There are a lot of variables here. But when I took that chicken breast out of the oven, its core temperature was 81 degrees Celsius, which is 7 degrees over the threshold for chicken to be considered cooked. Now, as I said, if you want to cook your chicken for longer, you are completely free to do so. But I would say that this chicken was quite dry. It was pretty bad. It was overdone. And looking at the data from the temperature probe, I could see that the chicken had reached that target core temperature of 74 degrees in just under 14 minutes. So the remaining 11 minutes in this case had just been spent overcooking the chicken, which is why it came out so dry. But what about the non-preheated chicken? Well, I did the same thing. I fried it for 5 minutes on a non-preheated frying pan, turning it halfway through. And then I put it into a non-preheated oven for 25 minutes at 170 degrees. And when I took it out, the core temperature was 80 degrees. So there was only 1 degree of difference between the preheated chicken and the non-preheated chicken. But it was still quite a bit over the threshold to be considered cooked. And the chicken itself was quite a bit juicier. I don't think I would have minded if someone had actually served me this chicken. And I think that's because in this case, the chicken took almost 19 minutes to reach that threshold of 74 degrees. So there was only about 6 minutes of overcooking time compared with 11 for the preheated chicken. And I think that must have made all the difference. So the conclusion at this point was, yes, with this particular chicken, it does seem that they built in a bit of a margin. And in fact, the margin is so big that even without preheating, if you have a properly working oven and you follow all the other instructions correctly, you still end up overcooking the chicken a little bit. Now, remember, I said that there are 2 functions to cooking. There's the food safety aspect, which we've covered now, but there's also the personal preference aspect of how much you actually want to cook your food for you to enjoy it. And if you want to cook your chicken higher than 74 degrees, you are free to do that. But many people, including myself, would say that chicken is actually a bit nicer if you cook it to a lower temperature than 74 degrees Celsius. But how is that possible without the risk of food poisoning? When you cook chicken, what you are trying to do is kill 99.99999% of the harmful bacteria in that chicken. And if you can do that, then food standards would say that that chicken is now safe to eat. So 74 degrees Celsius is the temperature that's been found that will kill those bacteria instantly. But there are some other ways that you can achieve exactly the same result. The UK Food Standards Agency has some timings on their website which you can use. They're a bit oversimplified and maybe overcautious because they're designed to cover all foods. But if you cook chicken to any of these temperatures for any of these times, it will be just as safe as if you had cooked it all the way up to 74 degrees Celsius. So I went back and had another look at our experiment, and I found that if you use those guidelines, then the chicken was actually done even quicker than we thought. So the non-preheated chicken was finished in less than 18 minutes, and the preheated chicken was ready after about 12.5 minutes. And if we had pulled the chicken out of the oven at those times, the final core temperature in both cases would have been about 72 degrees. So we would have shaved a few degrees off the final temperature, and the chicken would still have been just as safe to eat as before. But we can go even further than this, because the British recommendations are a bit simplified, and you can see why, because this is already a bit much to get your head around. But the Americans have no such reservations, and their Food Safety and Inspection Service publishes the good stuff. These are the raw numbers for every individual temperature and how long each different type of food would have to spend at that temperature to be considered safe to eat. So I went back again and had another look at the experiment, and using these numbers, I found that the non-preheated chicken was done in just over 15 minutes, and the preheated chicken was actually ready in just under 10 minutes. If we had pulled the chicken out of the oven at those times, it would have been at a core temperature of about 68 degrees Celsius, which a lot of people, including me, would say is pretty good. So Tesco's cooking instructions said that we should put this chicken in the oven for 25 minutes, but having crunched all of the numbers, in my opinion, more than half of the cooking time was spent just overcooking the chicken. Now that's just how I like my chicken, but what is clear here is that they did build a big safety margin into the cooking instructions here. And they have to, because they don't know what your oven is like. They don't know how well it can hold temperature, and they don't know how long it takes to warm up. And that is why they ask you to preheat, because at least then they can remove one variable from the equation. Otherwise, if your oven does take a bit longer to warm up, yeah, your food might still be raw at the end of the cooking time. So what can you do with this information? Well, regardless of whether you preheat or not, next time you cook chicken or any meat really, it might just be worth keeping more of an eye on it rather than just trusting the cooking times. The free option for chicken is to do this, and if you're not preheating especially, it might just be worth doing that at the end of the cooking time just to make sure that it is actually cooked. If you want more convenience and more confidence, you could go with one of the non-free options. So you could buy an instant read cooking thermometer, so stick that into the center of the thickest part of the meat, and in the case of chicken, if it says 74 degrees, then that chicken is definitely cooked. Or, more expensively, you could get yourself one of these, a wireless cooking thermometer. And this one I have here is from a brand called Combustion. They're not sponsoring the video, so I suppose I'll just give you like a little product review of my time with this. It's amazing. All of those big spreadsheets, the American spreadsheets with crazy numbers for all the different temperatures, is built into this. So it can do all of that for you, and it just tells you when the food is ready according to that standard. So as far as I'm aware, this is pretty much the only way for a random civilian like me to actually use those incredibly complicated scientific numbers in cooking. So I love it for that. It's amazing. But I will say that I bought two of them, and one of them just randomly died a few months ago, just stopped working. The company replaced it, which was great. But then more recently, like a week ago, my other one also died and stopped working in a slightly different way. It charges, but it just never finishes charging. It never actually turns on. I don't know. So I'm waiting to see if they'll replace that one as well. Hopefully they will. But it's amazing when it works.